Saudi Arabia has proven the scale of its goals as development accelerates and multi-billion-dollar worth of projects take shape in the country. Simultaneously, it has also indicated a strong desire for construction businesses to invest in the kingdom and in the development of new and innovative construction techniques. Focusing on such new methods of construction, one is modular construction. We will be hosting our roundtable today where we focus on how the evolution of modular construction is changing the construction sphere in Saudi Arabia. First up, we have Waleed Khaled, who is the Regional Sales Director at Losberger De Boer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Waleed. It's a pleasure to have you. Next up, we have Helena De Flaviis, who is a board member and Group Chief Strategist at Bawani Holding. Thank you so much for joining today, Helena.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Faisal Butt, who is the Project Delivery Executive Director at the Red Sea Development Company, also known as TRSDC. Thank you so much for joining us today, Faisal.
Thank you for having me.
We did get into a very good discussion before the start of today's final roundtable. But then before we start talking about the momentum that we're seeing in Saudi for modular construction, it's important to understand what exactly is modular construction. Are we in the right direction in approaching the methods, Waleed?
Well, modular construction is a wide industry.
Yeah.
Has been going for years and years, developing technologies, developing ideas and concepts. This movement with the development has brought modular from a very simple component, even sometimes we can call it tents,
Yes.
up to a module now that you can build high-rise buildings with it, big hospitals, big education facilities. So it has different elements. It has the precast, it has the steel, light steel, construction-grade aluminium. It has different approaches, which can serve different purposes, different activations. It can be on temporary basis.
Yeah.
It can be on semi-permanent basis or a permanent basis, and that the different range or the line range of different components, always having the privileges of off-site, clean, less waste, labor intensity is definitely less, and that reflect on a better timeline to deliver a project. So yeah, that in simple words, I believe, what is modular.
Yes, that's right. Very interesting point there. But it's also important to understand from a developer's perspective there, Faisal. Do you think as a developer, the approach towards modular construction and the way it's going forward, is it right? Are you seeing a lot of changes since, obviously, for Red Sea Development Company?
I think absolutely. Like Waleed mentioned, the advantages of doing modular, especially in our case, where we're in a remote location, we're located in a very sensitive environment. When you look at the marine environment, attracting the right skills of people, attracting the volume of labor to do traditional construction, compared to when you do modular, you see a big difference. Yeah. And for us to maintain and manage that in developing and delivering phase one, which is 3,000 hotel keys, there's a huge benefit to that.
Absolutely.
Both from environment, health and safety, just construction risk in general, and schedule as well.
Yeah.
That's absolutely what we're seeing in our coastal village community, where we are delivering 400,000 square meter of almost residential product there.
Yeah, interesting points there and sets the tone right. But just reflecting on what you said and coming to you, Helena, earlier you mentioned that there are certain components of modular construction that Bawani as a contractor is looking at. How has that been? How has that evolved since you started looking at modular construction?
The experience has been evolving quite well. We have delivered recently to Faisal at Red Sea a project based on precast, concrete precast. So our focus for the moment has been more on elements of modular, rather than modular in the full sense of the word, which I believe Waleed will discuss in more detail later. So we're looking at MEP prefab, concrete precast, In fact, I believe we're one of the first, if not the first companies to deliver a project to the government back in 2015 in Saudi Arabia to the Ministry of Education, delivering 44 schools using precast back in 2015. And now we are doing that again, 60 schools between Mecca and Jeddah. But we would like to go further. We don't want to stop there. We are already using, we talked briefly before about bathroom pods in one of our high-end projects in the UK, in London, Regent's Crescent. We have used bathroom pods there coming from Italy to the UK. We would like to develop further, especially to help with some of the challenges Waleed talked about in terms of shortage of labor, in terms of meeting some of our deadlines, which can be quite tight, and I think from a quality perspective, to ensure that we can deliver on the quality of the product to our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we all spoke about, obviously modular construction is gaining a lot of momentum, in the Middle East and North Africa, I would say, and primarily in Saudi, because Saudi is the part of discussion today. But obviously this means that the design and construction elements have evolved over the years. How would you say, Waleed, has this evolution been specifically in Saudi Arabia?
Designs is very important element when you start to speak or design a project or an infrastructure using modular, because it plays the biggest role in how the production will be. It sets the timeline, it sets the cost. So the design is crucial, and that's why we emphasize every client or every approach to a client to be involved from the beginning, to have every stakeholder around us, consultant, architect, the client himself, the project management, the operation, which is very important, how they put the image of operation in the future, what target audience they have, what's the quality of every component, to the chairs, to the hallways, the carpets, the ceiling, everything. So that sets the complete idea from the beginning for every stakeholder, and that takes it to the next level of production and deliveries. So everybody is on the same page, everybody knows what exactly he's going to be delivering or what's his scope, and nothing comes into faulty or a mistake, because it has been very calculated, the math behind it, and the idea of the concept to be delivered as the client, how he imagined it from the beginning. That's crucial. How it was happening or evolving into Saudi market, still we're seeing, yes, it is happening, but slowly. If I would like to put a percentage to that, we are still 30% achieving, and we still have 70% to go. It is knowledge, it is involvement, it is transparency, which is very important. Transparency, how we see it as a provider, is the old-fashioned. We are still facing the old-fashioned way of the idea, the concept, the RFP, who wrote the RFP, how he thought about it, what's the terms and condition has been put there. Is it modern? Is it conventional? He wants it to be delivered very fast, but at the same time he don't give you the specs that helps you to do that. And when you try to convince it to, okay, there are some specs which can be achieved, you're in a safe hands, we do this is the standards, whether Europeans or even Saudi standards. But to transform the whole thing, the whole document has been prepared before you step in, that's a challenge. If you are from the beginning doing the RFP together, then it's completely different idea.
Very important points made there, Waleed. And before I go to Faisal and Helena, I really want to know from you, do you think in that case, and we mentioned this before, conventional methods of construction always has a guideline, we know how it works, but do you think for modular construction also it's important to have a base guideline where developers understand that this is what the specs are and this is what we should take to the contractor, and then work on the project?
Yeah, definitely. See, I have to say first, conventional is will never go, will never fade.
Yeah.
Conventional is a pillar
Yeah.
to any kind of project or infrastructure. Never replace that. Modular is to complement that,
Yeah.
and to complement it in the sense of practicality, fast deliveries,
Yep.
return on investment, and plus the environmental
Yeah.
side of it, sustainability,
Absolutely.
wastage, labor intensity, because also globally now we face lack of experienced labor. That's globally.
Yep.
And for us, especially as an international company, European is difficult to find experienced skilled labor. The experienced people are aging, which is a challenge at the moment, and to find a replacement on that with youth, young talents,
Yeah.
experienced enough
Yeah.
to be involved, that's a big challenge. in
Absolutely.
Europe. So yes, again, to come to your point, conventional will stay,
Yeah.
modular will complement. Guidelines of modular has to be spread a little bit more,
Yeah.
communicated more to clients and everybody else, and to set that along with the conventional, at least civil defense
Yeah.
will know how to expect, what to expect. Municipalities,
Yeah.
same.
That's right.
All of that is very important, and it makes our job easier, and the client expectation as well. The client expectation is always set to the conventional.
Yeah.
When you speak to him about modular and how that to be delivered, and how that also meet the standards internationally, which is in Saudi, American standards is very well known, British as well. When we speak the same language, but end of the day, no, I need Saudi. Okay, it is the same. The Saudi standards has been set based on American standards, most of it. So yeah, guidelines definitely will help to complement whatever convention can provide, and they go. It's like a train.
Absolutely.
You go together.
And I think that brings me to a question for you, Faisal. I mean, when Red Sea Development Company chose to go into the modular sphere and have your residential developments being delivered as, you know, a modular construction element, definitely effectiveness and efficiency were two important points you looked at. But what were some of the other elements that you considered, you know, when streamlining those processes?
So standardization of product, you know, we talked about, you know, standardization of product in terms of how you deliver it, how you construct it, how you operate, and that was for us was key, especially for the residential community we were building. You know, for us, like I said, mentioned before, health and safety was key. We are bringing thousands and thousands of workers in a location which is a remote location. The closest hospital you have is 120 kilometers away. How do you make sure this workforce can live with a certain quality of life and can be protected from a health and safety perspective? So because of that, modular was definitely a route that we wanted to go. On top of that, you know, environmental concerns, sustainability concerns in terms of reduction of the overall waste. I mean, we saw around 30 to 40% reduction in traditional construction waste by just going modular in Coastal Village. And like I mentioned, this is 400,000 square meters of residential community. That's a big area. It's probably one of our largest development in phase one in terms of just, you know, floor area. On top of that, I mean, there were challenges with modular as well. I'll give you an example. When, you know, our partners, Saudi Eminent, they were installing these prefabricated boxes, because of the wind speeds in this area, it was sometimes very hard. There were days where you could not actually lift these by crane and put them into position because of the wind speeds were very high. So, you know, you probably would not see those challenges maybe in an urban community because, you know, you're a little bit more shielded. But there we saw that, okay, so we moved away from the traditional health and safety risk, but there was another risk of operating in an open environment where you can't lift these things, you know, 20 meters, you know, 15 meters, 20 meters because of the wind speeds. So it was a learning process for us as well. In terms of the overall production rate, I think we went initially from 32 days, 33 days per module to around 21 days. So it improved over time as well from the time it getting prefabricated, delivered, and installed on site. So these were a couple of things that led us towards modular construction, but then it came with its own difficulties because of our location. But I think now we are improving on this. We've learned a lot of things on that, and we are putting measures in place so we can avoid these in future developments.
Absolutely, very comprehensively explained there, and it's really exciting to see how a developer such as TRSDC is looking at the modular construction sphere, despite having met so many challenges. But you're still continuing to look at it, and I'm sure for future developments that happen within the project, the Giga project, you will be looking at those elements too. And that brings me to a very exciting question. But if in that case, Helena, what do you think are certain growth factors for modular elements gaining traction in Saudi Arabia?
I think a few of those we discussed here before.
Yeah.
Traditional construction is a very labor-intensive industry, as we all know, and as Waleed mentioned before, it is a challenge. It's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for our peers. We're constantly doing field trips to a number of countries to recruit in the thousands. We had the Minister of Labor from Thailand visiting us this week, visiting one of our sites on the back of a new arrangement with the Saudi government. And I think this is one of the factors, and that, in my view, will enable the growth of modular. The second one is the sheer volume of projects we have in Saudi Arabia. I think with the PIF Giga project subsidiaries alone, Red Sea and Amal and Yom, the GDA, Kidia, etc., and the very short time frame, and there is a need for us to try and speed up that process. And that's if we're talking about those Giga projects alone. We have all other targets as part of Vision 2030. I think one key one, in my view, that will support the growth of modular construction is in the housing market.
Yes.
So the government has a very aggressive target to reach home ownership by Saudis to 70% of the population by 2030. So there's a big gap and shortage of housings that we're going to have to work together between developers, investors, and contractors and providers of modular construction to help mitigate. So I think a combination of demand in the market, shortage of labor alone, I see as a fantastic combination for growth for modular construction here in the kingdom.
Very valid point there, and also I'll pick on the point that you really mentioned about housing, specifically because last year Construction Week did the Leaders in Construction Saudi conference here in Riyadh, and one of the panel discussions was about the housing requirement, and it was very good to see how one of the panelists actually brought modular construction into the discussion and mentioned that it's important that we are looking at modular construction as an essential element, to make sure that you're delivering the bulk number of housing projects. And I think that brings me to a question for you, Waleed, because Losberger De Boer has been doing not just the traditional modular construction, but you've been looking into luxury, you've been looking into hospitality, you've been looking into entertainment projects. How different is the approach every time you move from one sector to another sector for modular construction?
Lead time is the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Clients always, we have a large canvas of projects and mega projects, as Helena just said, and that puts the client into pressure. That pressure is transmitted to every other contractor, subcontractor. So yes, moving from segment to another, we are looking now to every segment moving together. Hospitality is very important. Tourism, with the Vision 2030, we are looking as the ambitious plans, 100 million by 2030. That has been an announcement of His Highness. 5.3% of the GDP. That's large, and you cannot see it in many countries around the world. So, with this kind of plan and the big canvas, as I said, with projects in every segment. Contribution of Modular, I think, will play a big role.
Absolutely.
To help that comes to reality, comes online, as we would like to say, and usable for visitors around the world. Saudis themselves, they can start to enjoy that, and returns start to happen.
Interesting. Yeah, very, very valid point there. And I think it also brings us down to a very crucial element, and I would say that is mindset change that we need to have when you're looking at modular construction. And Faisal, I would like to know from you, when you approached as Red Sea Development Company, when you approached modular construction, was modular constructions gaining a lot of traction at that point? And I'm talking about, say, 4 years ago when we started construction on the Red Sea Development Company. And how did you see that mindset shifting, you know, towards adapting those kind of technologies?
The answer is no. So in the beginning, you know, we completed a master plan in 2018, which was a traditional master plan in terms of where we're going to develop within the Red Sea zone, and then that trickled into design, right? So traditional design guidelines being developed for all the design teams, which are spread across the world. Very quickly, we realized around the capacity constraints on the market. Right? So when we start looking at what we need to deliver in phase 1, how long do we have? How much workforce do we need? What's the capacity of the market? Soon it became very evident that traditional methodologies will not let you deliver this in the time frame you have. Then it was a question of, okay, how do we, and design already started at that time, so how do we go back and enforce these methodologies into design? And we had to go back, sit with the likes of WATG and Foster and Partners, who were designing most of our resorts at that time, is to introduce modular guidelines to make sure that the design they're delivering lends itself to modular construction. So that was one part of it. So even today, all of the resorts that we are designing or we have finished designing, we have modular guidelines. So there are certain elements of the resorts, of the hotels, of a building, which needs to be modular, and they need to make sure that's delivered that same way in the design they deliver to us. So that was the design part of the thing. And then the second was, okay, how do you construct these, right? You mentioned about issues around logistics and lead times. You know, we also realized very early on when we were doing our construction village, in which our contractor was bringing a lot of these modules from outside of Saudi. And that led to long transportation issues, you know, issues at the customs because of clearance of these things. But then soon enough, when we partnered with Saudi Amana, they developed a facility in Rabiq, which was within Saudi. And all of a sudden, these issues went away, right? So then we saw the transportation time became shorter. So I think, so we tackled design in a way where we instructed the designers to make sure the modular guidelines are put together and developed within the design. But on the construction side, I think it's about making sure that the facilities and the infrastructure within the kingdom to develop these. If you are still going to bring bathroom pods and other elements from outside, from Europe, from other parts of the world, you're still going to face lead times, transportation issues. With the global struggle in transportation right now, I mean, you can imagine, you know, how that's going to pan out. So I think it's bit by bit we kind of overcame this, but it was a learning for us as well. You know, we soon enough when we realized that what we need to build and the time we have, the amount of people, resources we will need to deliver this, it was very simple. That this cannot be delivered within this time with traditional construction.
Interesting point there, and I want to ask you one very quick question. I probably know your answer on this, but then do you think in case of modular construction, is it always good to have your contractors' fabrication facilities closer to the site, because then you can do away with all the logistic challenges that you were mentioning? And then when you said that when you were placing the pods on the site, a lot of climatic changes were also there, but then when you have your fabrication units closer, do you think then you can still bridge that gap between the timelines?
It does help. It does help. You know, when you look at, for example, I'll answer your question. in a way that when you look at high-end product, it's very important for the operator, for the developer, for us to actually look at the mock-up units, look at the units, how they look, bring the operators and make sure the validation is done on the design or the first in place units. So it does help if these are located close to the site. I think COVID also, the last 2 years, kind of exaggerated this whole issue where, movement was limited, mobility was limited by us, by designers, by contractors. So whatever was within the kingdom, it was easier for us to approach. But it does help. It does reduce the transportation costs. It does reduce logistical issues with customs. Plus, it also develops a local industry. Yeah. I think as that's our responsibility as part of delivering Vision 2030, that if we're not developing local industry in Saudi Arabia, then probably we're not doing a part of what we are supposed to do as part of this overall plan. So I think we are definitely in favor of developing the local industry, the local market, having facilities and fabrication units close to our project, where you can go away with these supply chain issues.
Yeah, very, very essential point made there. And I'm just picking on your point about COVID-19 and in the aftermath that we saw. And interestingly, Losberger De Boer delivered the Jeddah Superdome during the peak time when COVID actually stuck, not just Saudi Arabia, but all of Middle East. How was that journey for Losberger? I would say, how challenging was that journey for your team?
Jeddah Superdome, for us as Losberger De Boer, and I think also for the client and every stakeholder was involved in it, is challenging but a successful case study, which builds on whatever Faisal just said now, how you can control in-country production and delivery. We didn't depend on any production to happen outside the country. Yeah. Yes, some raw material was coming from abroad. Majority of the biggest portion of the dome was manufactured in Saudi, which is very important as well. And it was the contribution to the country, to the workshop, the local workshops here, subcontractors, everybody else was involved. So it was a balance between international standard quality product, but we can call it Saudi made, 100%, because it has been made here. Okay. Even bringing the press down here, it was considered that way. So yes, it controlled our list. We faced when COVID hits, some of the raw material was coming from Italy, special pipes, because the complete roof is done with aluminium pipes, steel pipes, steel pipes with aluminium connectors. And all of that has been designed and supposed to be manufactured in Italy, in one of our factories. And then Italy, we know what happened with it. Yeah. And then quickly we had to shift to our factories in China. And China is also difficult, but China didn't close. So we had the chance to have the remaining of the material from our Chinese factory, our own factory. Yeah. It's not outsourced. Yeah. And we had all the material in place, everything set. The rest of the material was produced here.
Bawani, as a traditional contractor, has worked with so many stakeholders in the industry. But when it comes to choosing modular construction elements, how has that been in terms of early involvement of, say, your designer, your client, your subcontractors? Have you seen that the kind of communication gap that we usually see during conventional methods, have you seen that reduce when we're looking at modular?
Back to what I said before, in terms of that shift between procurement methods, from design build to design and build, we are definitely seeing a shift. Yeah. But it's a learning curve. Yeah. It's a learning curve, and it's not something that was perfect. Yeah. We do have to adapt. I think adaptability and making sure that we understand who needs to get involved. Because I believe the other part of it is ensuring that we do not delay that design process either. It needs to be efficient as well. Yeah. It's not because we're going to lock everything in that we're also going to take a couple of years. It's important to ensure that that's efficient. So communication, extremely important. Collaboration, extremely important. We talked about the involvement of the operator, the user of the facility, whichever that facility may be, being extremely important. But I think also that integration of the whole supply chain, back to what Waleed said, this is something that even, especially after COVID, we are even more focused on security of supply chain, ensuring that we do have a degree of vertical integration across our ecosystem. And that's twofold. A, to ensure that we do have the supplies, which I do believe modular will definitely support with. And B, back to Faisal's point earlier, is to ensure that we're also promoting the industry within Saudi Arabia, within the kingdom. We are one of the largest construction contractors in the kingdom, and we feel that we have that responsibility as well with the country to ensure that we support, elevate the whole supply chain. And we're definitely seeing that happen. Big steps, but I think together we're getting there.
Yes, and those baby steps are absolutely essential, because you are talking technically about changing construction techniques and adapting to new methods, you know, just to amplify the existing methods in the market. So definitely it's important there. Now coming to you, Faisal, I would love to hear from you about the medical facility that you had opened last year at the Red Sea Developments site, and would you talk to us about the kind of journey that you had to go through when you were setting it up? And I know you also use that as a vaccination facility. What kind of role did Modular play in setting that up?
Yeah, so this facility was a construction village housing where we house around 10,000 workers who all work on our site. And this facility, it took us about, so the construction village housing itself, it took us about a year and a half to build, and it was all modular as well. And then, you know, the need was to basically put in a medical facility either by a medical operator locally or international medical operator to respond to emergency services. So International SOS was we partnered with them to build this facility. And this facility was built in less than 70 days. So it was all modular, prefabricated. We use the existing contractor we use for our construction village housing. And, you know, right after that, COVID started, right? So COVID started work stopped. There was a lot of stoppage of work on site. There's a lot of requirement for vaccination. Ministry of Health had different guidelines that we had to follow. So this facility kind of came in the right time. And it was a fully developed facility where we had approximately 25, 26 staff, medical staff from International OSS working there. And, you know, because of the timing, we were able to convert this facility into a vaccination center as well, you know, which was actually led by Ministry of Health. So all our labor, which was staying in the construction village housing, were able to get vaccines from this facility. So again, it's an example where we were able to put together a facility very quickly. If we were to go traditional to put a facility of that size, it would have taken us months, and probably we would have been in COVID by that time. So it's definitely an example where Modular really helped fast track this facility, and you know it was for beneficial use in the end.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and also a very good, I would say, a good story for other giga projects that are now, you know, in the development stage and then going towards, you know, the concept stage and looking at changing things. It's important to see how it was successful for you, I mean Red Sea Development Company, and adapting that same kind of methods and replicating that and understanding how it could work for the industry. But we spoke about challenges, we spoke about the methods, supply chain, but a very interesting point there would be the bidding stage. We didn't really touch upon that, Waleed. Would you like to talk about what kind of a process is that when you're looking at a modular construction project? Is it any different? I'm assuming it is.
It is indeed. As we earlier said, setting the RFP guidelines, terms and condition, specs.
Yeah.
If there is early involvement, early engagement with all stakeholders, it will change the approach of the bid. And we are always recommending that to the client. we can be part of that. It's not necessarily to be awarded the project directly. Release it to the market, make it a bid, everybody bids, but set the RFP properly correct to serve the purpose and the delivery. That's very important, and that's why we try to emphasize how modular or what modular can produce and deliver in the early stage.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely it makes a big change and a big difference how the bid and whoever will be involved. Because sometimes you see projects like Formula One as an example. Let's take that as an example because it sets who can be involved conventional way and modular way. The F1 is an event at the end of the day, but the government or Ministry of Sports decided to have something permanently to serve the purpose of Formula One as a street circuit and to have a lot of component around it, retail, F&B, marina, hotel. So the setup, the master plan sounds conventional, but the short timeline that they have to deliver the whole thing, it says modular. Then we started from the early stage. We tried to be involved as much as possible. Transparency was a little bit an issue at that time because the setup even of the team for the operation and the on-ground operation of the whole thing was made in a very short time as well. So the RFP was set as modular. Happily, we have been very happy with a very specific design because Tilka, as an example, who they designed the circuit itself, is aware about how these things or components can be built around. But you see, conventional contractors are involved. So, okay, then the competition is not fair. The competition will be, I'm a modular, I can deliver very fast, I have a set cost for that. We can definitely deliver the design as is, exactly it is, because Tilka designed it, and we can deliver it. We dealt with Tilka in so many other countries for the same purpose of Formula One. And then we spoke about the very big gap of cost. Okay, what we can do, we try to approach the client again, and Mr. Client, tell us where we lack. We try to do something. But again, communication was not easy enough. And this is what you see now. Yes, part of the thing is good. The other part could be better. And this is a challenge.
That's
Who's involved, how he's involved, what the RFP, all of that makes
absolutely
a large change.
And it goes back to the point where we mentioned about setting the guidelines right, drawing the line between where this is conventional and where does conventional stop and where does modular come into the picture. I think that is very, very, very essential to specifically for a project like you just mentioned. Now looking at a different perspective into modular would be the technological elements that you see. I mean, modular, the way it's designed and the way it's delivered, technology also plays a very important and essential role in that. What, according to you, Helena, has changed, has changed the industry in adopting more technology when it comes to modular construction? Have you seen that change grow over the years?
Absolutely. I think it all comes together. I think the technology, without the technology component to those modular elements or a full modular, you still have to bring the technology later on, so you do have to integrate and better integrate the different elements. So what we're doing right now is seeing how we do have a technology company as part of one of our subsidiaries to see how that technology company can better work with off-site construction, already building what is necessary to avoid even further on-site interactions, avoid even further on-site delivery, and try to eliminate that error, that human error element from the construction cycle. So we're definitely seeing, but I anticipate that a lot more, and Waleed might be able to speak to that more than me, that a lot more will be happening quite rapidly in the coming months.
Yeah.
I would say.
Would you like to build on that?
Yeah, definitely. We have been a good witness to the technology development, being a company in the field for 100 years.
Yeah.
But recently, the last, I would say, 10 years, and the future, how it looks, big involvement of artificial intelligence, robotic systems, the complete production offsite is very well controlled to the point of that you don't need to do something now with a human involvement. So that takes the error to a very limited level, and that also increases the possibilities and probabilities of deliveries.
Yeah. Very, very interesting point there, and it also reminds me of what we discussed before we started off the discussion, is the return on investment that you see. And do you see a lot of return of investment, like a proportionally high return of investment when you are looking at projects, in the modular construction sphere as a modular contractor yourself? Do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. When you deliver something like Jeddah Superdome again, come on, we delivered December 2020.
Yeah.
They started to accommodate the first event maybe a couple of months after that.
Yeah.
So let's say January, February 2021. The number of events has been held inside the dome and not using the complete dome. We're talking about 35,000 square meters of space. They partially used concerts, exhibitions, conventions.
Yeah.
The number, I cannot recall it, but I would say it really pays off. At least big portion of the investment has been made, and this is not stopping. Jeddah is seeing a high level of visitors and international speakers and international events happening in the dome. I couldn't imagine that way. I thought it would take some time for them to build up. But the minute it was ready, Sarah didn't save any more time, and it started to hit the place with a lot of activations.
Yes.
And I think that's a very good example of return on investment.
Yeah, and interesting because you also delivered the project before your timeline, so more events there. Interesting points there. Now, taking the conversation a little further ahead, Faisal, I mean, you mentioned initially about localization playing a very important role in the Red Sea Development Company's involvement and the project's involvement. When you're looking at projects that we're talking about right now and the scale of massiveness of the project, how essential do you think it's important to have local talent and local content involved, not just for modular construction, but overall construction?
Listen, that's a central pillar. Yeah. I mean, all these giga projects as part of Vision 30, that's one of their biggest performance indicator in terms of how much jobs and how much talent you're creating in the country, whether it's human capital, whether it's technology, whether it's setting up industry. So we, looking at construction, we talked about construction management and our approach to delivery. That was, in the beginning, construction management at this scale, at this size, probably never done in the Middle East at this level. I know it was an alarming thing for everybody, right? So can we even do this level of construction management when we are actually delivering these many assets? Do you have the supply chain? Do you have the subcontractors? Do you have those skill sets at that trade level to actually deliver so many projects with a construction management approach? But the vision of our executive management from day one was, this is how we're going to deliver back to the country in terms of upskilling the labor, upskilling the trade contractors, that MEP contractor, that contractor who's doing just the facade work. This was the only way to do it. And I think, it's been as much of a challenge has been for us to actually build that approach all the way from design management to construction management. It was almost like a rethink as well, because a lot of individuals who are working at the Red Sea come from, probably the traditional design build background, design and build background. It was a completely novel approach, but I think this has This has led to increase in participation of the local subcontractors in the local region, in the region of Tabuk and those areas, into our projects, bringing in or encouraging modular fabricators to come, such as Amana Dubox, to come and build facilities in that region. That also increased participation of labor as well. So I think, you know, this all will lead to an uplift of the construction industry in Saudi. And I think, you know, for us, that's a key pillar. You know, that's a non-negotiable. I think, you know, and with the partners that we have around the table, I mean, if we are all on the same page and driving this forward, I think, you know, by 2030, we will reach a significant milestone in terms of what we add to the GDP, the human capital we develop here, and the local talent we develop in this country. And at the end of the day, you know, we for today, for example, we are going out to Switzerland to prefabricate some of our overwater villas, which need precision cutting of timber. Okay, Saudi might not have timber, but can the precision cutting be done here? Right? And this precision cutting is to the level where there are large panels which fit within a millimeter when they are delivered here on site. So yes, Saudi probably cannot, you know, produce timber, but they can actually do the precision cutting in this country. So these are the kind of things that we're exploring as a developer, and I feel it's our responsibility to bring this knowledge base back to Saudi.
Yeah.
That's part of our job.
Very essential point there, and I think it only adds on to developing the local talent and attracting more talent to come into the picture, you know. So I think in that matter, it's a very good example that you just mentioned right now. But talking a little bit more into the discussion that we're having, and I think Waleed mentioned this earlier, you know, modular is very unique in the nature. It's not just the temporary structures that you're looking at. You can also use it for permanent structures. And one of the crucial elements that you said was when you were working on the Red Sea project, you know, Bawani, as a company, you know, there are certain elements that you used, but that's going to be a permanent structure we're talking about. How was that, you know, when executing the project?
That's definitely supported in terms of accelerating the process. So we had all the precast concrete delivered to site. Again, it was not as rushed project as we've had in the past, having to deliver something in 2-3 months. We did have but it definitely supported, I think, twofold. One part is that element of locking in some elements of design early on. That was a design and build project, so part of that happened naturally anyway. But it also enabled us to meet the timelines despite the issue of COVID that we have. We pretty much started together with the pandemic. But I think that modular element moving forward, if we can have even more of that, bringing in the MEP prefab, bringing I think that will support even further. And I believe a key part, as I would say that it was just one of the outcomes, it's part of our target, part of our strategy, for on the ESG front, that we did see a reduction of our Scope 1 emissions, reduction of solid construction waste on site, but and hopefully we're also keen to see reduction of Scope 3, especially in relation to traffic to site, to reduce the emissions from our whole supply chain, our whole subcontractors, with that transportation to from site to be reduced by a very large percentage by bringing the modular units in.
Yeah, very, very good point there. And also because my next question was technically about, you know, how it supports sustainability. And this was for you, Waleed. I mean, Saudi has a set target of, you know, sustainability towards Vision 2030, and it aims to be net zero by 2060. How do you think does modular construction play a very crucial role in supporting those sustainability targets?
Sustainability and modular, they work together. It's by nature a sustainable product. We mentioned before reducing the waste and the labor intensity and the logistic emissions. All of that plays a role in sustainability. But we believe also sustainability plays a role in the operation, which is very important. And I think that should be added in the plans and the preparation of what could be the product sustainable to the whole master plan. We ourselves, we embrace sustainability very strong. Recently we have been awarded the silver medal of EcoVadis, sustainable. Whatever we produce and manufacture, whether for the product, 95 different products off shelf is waste free. We never build something and dismantle it and we leave anything behind us. It's reusable. So it definitely plays a big role in achieving that. And as a company as well, we set one of the set goals for us until 2050 is to be net zero emission as well, carbon free.
Very interesting points there, and that brings me to you, Faisal. Red Sea Development Companies also set targets for the Red Sea project, and even in the last 4 years, you've won several awards, for the sustainability approach. Would you like to build on the discussion and tell us more about how that has been built into the project's delivery?
Sure. It started again at the master plan level, right? So in 2008, I mentioned that when we spent about a year and a half master planning the whole Red Sea project. I mean, sustainability was a key part of how we develop and how we operate all the assets within it. And I think a key factor was to limit the amount of visitors that come within the project. I mean, we know this very well, that with development comes environmental and other impacts. With tourism, with people, with the operations, depending on how many people you bring in, that has an impact on the environment as well. So the first thing for us was we undertook a marine spatial planning exercise with KSA. And the basis of this exercise was to map out all terrestrial and all marine life within the Red Sea. KSA had a lot of data from the last 15-20 years. They've been doing research in the Red Sea. And then looking at the data and then overlaying that with our master plan in terms of built assets, but also in terms of the operations as well. So it was a complete simulation which we did just to basically forecast that when this destination is fully developed, has 70-80% occupancy, what is the human impact which is going to have on the environment? And through that analysis, we determined with KSA that we needed to cap the number of visitors, which meant also reduce the amount of development that you will do. So that was the basis of the master plan. I think it was a very successful exercise over a year and a half that we undertook with the master plans and KSA. So that underpins our master plan. Limiting the number of people, which means limiting the amount of development you do. We had 91 islands within the lagoon to develop. Out of that, we're only developing 22 islands. Some islands are completely set aside or conservation islands because there's very sensitive ecology on those locations. So, we can proudly say that when we developed this master plan, that was our approach as to how to minimize the impact of human intervention to the environment. So that was the first thing. And then that's what started the journey. After that, that's how we introduced the guidelines for the architects, for the designers, and then we talked about building sustainability. Then we talked about how do we talk about construction sustainability in terms of modular and other things, and eventually that will lead into operations. So, whenever we talk about sustainable development and how to minimize impact on the environment, I think what we did in 2018 was something incredibly different from other developers around the world, how they approach development.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Faisal, and very detailed. I mean, I think that journey essentially is very important for others to also look into, and I think it's also helping contractors such as Al Bawani who are working with you, and then maybe Losberger De Boer, maybe in the future. So it also sets the tone right, and like we spoke about guidelines, I think that's the right approach as well. Now, I think we have spoken essentially about all of modular construction's elements, but to wrap this discussion, Waleed, what do you think more needs to be done, and how should we approach modular construction better, especially in Saudi Arabia?
Recapping on what we earlier said, knowledge transfer, expertise of previous applications has been done with modular to be communicated to the client, to the stakeholder of the projects. Early involvement, for sure, as we said before.
Yeah.
And I think that by doing whatever we communicated together today is directly conveying the message properly within the group of the project.
Absolutely. Very well wrapped there. And I think I completely agree with you on that point. And while we are already taking baby steps, but I think it's time for us to also take bigger steps. Now, coming to you, Helena, because you have a background of infrastructure, how would you like to wrap today's discussion and tell us if you think that, modular could also necessarily be important for social infrastructure projects in Saudi?
Absolutely, very good point. I think now what we're seeing is two ends of the spectrum, as we discussed before. I would like to see more of it covering that really needed social infrastructure, healthcare, education, and housing.
Yes.
I think these are three sectors that would greatly benefit from modular construction in order to help the kingdom achieve, and in order that we can collectively support the kingdom achieve some very aggressive targets across those three sectors: housing, healthcare, and education.
We are definitely looking forward to seeing how that, comes up in Saudi Arabia, and maybe the other countries as well could learn from Saudi in the future. Absolutely. And what would be your final thoughts, Faisal? And do you think we will see more modular construction projects coming out of the Red Sea?
Absolutely, no question. I think with the giga projects, with the likes of Roshan, where we talked about before, which is all about housing and all about that volume, I think it's only a matter of time. I think the important thing is for the ecosystem, people like us and organizations like us, to actually start thinking about investment within the country in terms of infrastructure, in terms of human capital. These things are extremely important because us as a developer, we want local content. That's part of our overall ambition, actually increase local content within our construction. So I think it's a collective responsibility to make sure that it comes within the kingdom. You bring up the talent, you bring up the technology, you bring up the infrastructure as well, and there's no question that we're going to make big leaps in this direction over the next couple of years.
And it's all a wait and watch time to see how better we do this, I would say. Thank you so much once again, three of you. It was such a pleasure having you with us and just discussing more about not just modular construction, but how it's helping Saudi grow, in the giga project sphere that we are into right now. Once again, thank you so much, Waleed, Helena, and Faisal. Such a pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion with Waleed, Helena, and Faisal, and I'm sure it has opened new avenues into how modular construction can transform the industry. It sure is an exciting time for Saudi Arabia, where we are seeing a sea of transformation, and we are seeing stakeholders as well as government embracing future methods to build not just cities now, but cities and giga projects of the future. If you enjoyed watching this video, you know the drill. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below in the comment section. I am Ranju Warrier, the editor of Construction Week Middle East, signing off. I'll see you again in another interesting roundtable discussion. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.